How's it going, guys? I'm Miles Kendrick, and I'm doing my PowerPoint report on Black women's early organizations. Um, so, Black women's organizations were inspired by these independent women, Sojourner Truth, Frances Ellis Walker Harper, and Harriet Tubman. They all played key roles in their own specialized areas, in which they fought for equal rights for women and also for blacks in the United States of America. Obviously, despite their influences on their own, Black women still faced many challenges and were excluded from organizations that white women groups had and put together in different meetings and things that they did. Sometimes Black women were excluded from those things. Black female reformers understood that kind of being a Black woman back in that during that time was a double-edged sword. Not only were you Black, but also you were a woman. So, obviously you were discriminated because of the color of your skin, but also too because of, women were looked as less than men back in that time, and didn't have many rights or much respect. And obviously this impacted their opportunities a lot. And like I mentioned before, other white suffrage organizations didn't include them in their get-togethers and meetings and stuff like that. But these women weren't fazed by those challenges, and they weren't fazed by the discrimination and people telling them that they didn't have a right for what they were fighting for. They still believed in what they were fighting for, and knew that it would change lives for blacks in America. So one of the people that laid the foundation for these Black women organizations was Frances E.W. Harper, and she was known as an author, orator, and social reformer. She was very notable for poetry, speeches, essays, and also she had a couple books that are well-renowned. And she really emphasized abolitionism, temperance, and women's suffrage. Talking a little bit more about Harper, her first impact came in 1854, and she gave an address on the education and the elevation of the colored race, basically talking about how education could basically change the lives and change their perspective on Black people, and that they were capable of getting education and becoming people that could leave an impact on society and in their community with their education and what they bring to the table. And she obviously she did a couple tours in Maine, lecturing for anti-slavery, and also too traveled throughout the Midwest as well, emphasizing and talking about the same things, and trying to abolish slavery. After the Civil War, she made several more lecture tours in the South, and in 1883 to 1890, she was in charge of activities among Blacks for the National Women's Christian Temperance Union, and also became director of the American Association of Education of Colored Youth in 1894. And she also was a big helping hand in organizing things for the National Association of Colored Women, which she served as vice president. So she had her hand in a lot of organizations that Black women had back then, fighting for civil rights and women's rights. Another person that I wanted to mention also was Harriet Tubman, and out of all of them, probably one of my favorites. And her birthday is unknown, which is pretty interesting about kind of an interesting fact about her. But she's from Dorchester County, Maryland, and she was originally a slave and escaped. And while she was enslaved. She got hit with a 2-pound weight, leaving her to deal with headaches and narcolepsy throughout her life. But, that Harriet Tubman didn't let that stop her. As I mentioned, she was enslaved and escaped. And after she escaped, she helped others gain their freedom, and was one of the great leaders of the Underground Railroad. Tubman benefited from the Underground Railroad herself when she escaped from slavery. So I think, maybe that's probably why, she was inspired to help people escape like she did. And she escaped to the North successfully and returned to the South, and helped many people escape. And she knew the lay of the land very well. She knew, the ins and outs, and she was very smart and meticulous about the way that she, tried to help people escape. And if someone was trying to turn back when they were on their way, to escaping to the North, if someone wanted to turn back, she would tell them either you continue on or you die, because there was many times that, there was close calls, and, she had to think on her toes and be very smart of hiding these people and things like that. And, it's very dangerous, obviously. And, but the interesting thing is she was never caught or lost a passenger while she was traveling from the South to the North, helping enslaved African Americans gain their freedom. And like I said, she also participated in other anti-slavery and women's rights movements. One of the most interesting, I think, parts about Harriet Tubman is her impact on the Civil War. The knowledge that she gained, helping people escape through, from the South, from slavery in the South, she was able to in turn use that for the Civil War and help Union military commanders, and make herself useful and make herself valuable to these military commanders, and aiding them to, win this war that was being fought. And this war is very important, obviously, for blacks, because this was, going to change a lot of things. And, who knows if the Confederates won, things might have been different for African Americans or blacks for a much longer time. Also, Harriet Tubman used her skills to find Confederate supply lines and troop placements. Obviously, her helping people escape slavery in the South. She knew the lay of the land really well, and she knew how to communicate with those who were enslaved around that area in order for them to give her tips on where this equipment was, or where these troops were, or where they were traveling from or crossing from. And she was very good. And also, too, it was said that she used a disguise to disguise as an old lady to walk throughout town and ask these slaves kind of where these troops were headed, where these supplies were, and stuff like that. So she was very crafty and smart with the way that she went about her recon on the Confederate military troops. She also was a nurse and a very respected guerrilla operative, and she was very useful for the Civil War, and had a big impact on it. So one of the early organizations that black women had was the National Association of Colored Women. In 1896, they founded the association, and became the largest foundation of Black Women's Club. And Mary Church Terrell became the first president of the National Association of Colored Women. So suffrage was an important goal for black female reformers, and the National Association of Colored Women were big advocates on a wide range of topics to improve life for blacks, and trying to change Jim Crow laws in the South that, obviously made black people segregated. Their motto was "Lifting as we climb," and an example of this is when, when black men won the right to vote. All these tests and kind of like booby traps were popping up so that they couldn't vote. And the National Association of Colored Women wanted to help them, and obviously they wanted to help them by getting the vote for women, and then also making it much more accessible and easy for black men to vote as well. The National American Women's Suffrage Association and other white suffrage organizations held conventions that excluded black women. Black women were forced to march separately in the women's suffrage parade. And a lot of times when women's suffrage is talked about, a lot of times the impact that black women had and their organizations had on the movement and really helping and contributing and making an impact is overlooked a lot of times. So the National Council of Negro Women, so it was a faction that was founded in 1935. It was led by Mary McLeod Bethune, formed the National Council of Negro Women to put pressure on the political system to improve conditions for African Americans. So I think this is an important organization because obviously politics was one of the biggest areas that black people were discriminated. There was laws and, like I said, Jim Crow laws and just certain things that were put in place to that really lowered the quality of life for blacks in the United States and made them feel less than and didn't give them as many opportunities that whites had and as many freedoms that whites had. They had to accept less than. And, they just wanted an even playing field. So going the political route was obviously the best way to go about it if you want to make change immediately and make, long-lasting impact as well. The NCNW dominated both politics and the politics and national agenda of black women, and the National Association of Colored Women also with the NCNW were really important in black women's political activity and helping, the social conditions and stuff like that get better for blacks in the United States. And the Afro Suffrage Club was also influenced by Ida Wells, one of the original and one of the most influential black women leaders in the United States. And this was a sorority who intended on making a call of action to all black women in Chicago in order to spread awareness for political and civic racism in America. These groups added to the power in numbers in the women's suffrage movement and push for women's right to vote. So they're very important, and a lot of these women in this sorority, in this club, were young black female students. These black women were college students pursuing education. So not only were they fighting for rights and fighting to make change for the greater good of women and blacks in the United States, but also too they're pursuing an education at the same time. So you see how ambitious and courageous these young women were on the road to fighting for more. So these are my sources. Thank you guys for your time. It was my pleasure.